All right, everyone, we are going to go ahead and get started today. Thank you for joining today's webinar on hazardous waste reporting. My name is Tayo Chase, and I'll just be going over a few housekeeping items. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please submit them on the questions tab of that GoToWebinar control panel. You'll usually see that located on the right-hand side of your monitor. The questions will be sent to staff members to answer, and we'll send out the answers to everybody in chat. So we'll also be covering any remaining questions at the end of the presentations as well. So there's also a PDF of the presentation on the handouts tab of that same GoToWebinar control panel. And I'll be sending out a copy of the slides to everyone shortly after the presentation. When the presentation's over, you'll also be able to fill out a survey. So you can give your feedback on the presentation or let us know what topics you want covered in the future. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to David here to get started.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Welcome to today's presentation. It's Are You Ready to Report? I'm David Janke, and I'll be guiding you through the presentation. I've been an environmental scientist 3 at the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality for about 3 years now. And I've been the point person for all the new software being implemented by both ADEQ and the EPA involving the hazardous waste industry for even longer than that, maybe about 14 years. Also with us is Matt Helton. He's the new business analyst, and he's taking over my position as the point man, but I'm still involved with all of this stuff. So hopefully between the two of us, we can help you navigate the particular intricacies of my DEQ, which I'll be covering today. It's not advancing, just so you know, Tayo. Can you help me with that?
The slides aren't advancing.
Yeah.
We can try to show your screen.
I guess I have to use the clicker.
Oh, that
okay.
works. Okay.
So here's how we're going to attack this. It's the beginning of the new year, and quarterly and annual reports to ADEQ are now due. In fact, Matt probably answered 100 phone calls on Tuesday, so that's how big the volume is involving questions this time of year. So first, I'll be going over the details of registration reporting, and I'll do that first because you must register annually before you can submit any generation reports. And I'll probably be saying that a few more times today because it's really important. Second, I'll go over generation reporting, and that is the function in my DEQ about which ADEQ receives the most inquiries. So those are the reports that are due this winter. However, if you need to update your site's information, especially its generator status, you will need to access other functions in my DEQ. With the new hazardous waste rules recently adopted by the state, you may now be able to lower your status. So this modification process may be important to you. Third, I'll go over how and when to apply for an episodic event. So this is really the trigger for lowering your status if you want to. This new rule was adopted last year in February and allows a site to temporarily increase its generation status without having to abide by the rules of the greater status. Finally, I'll go over the advantages of how to consolidate multiple VSQGs with one LQG. It's another rule adopted last February. But I will say this, my DEQ has not yet been programmed to accommodate this rule, but we have developed a workaround, so I'll go over how you can do that. So there are two types of reports which all sites having an active EPID number need to complete on a regular basis. Also, these reports may result in an organization owing the state of Arizona some fees. The first report is the annual registration report and the annual generation reporting. Some other generators will not hand in an annual generation report, but a quarterly generation report. And I'll go over the difference of which types need to do which type of report. Okay, registration report must be submitted annually. They're required from very small quantity generators, small quantity generators, large quantity generators, treatment storage disposal facilities, which are now called receiving facilities, Arizona transporters, and any out-of-state transporters that picked up or dropped off hazardous waste in Arizona during the previous calendar year. The due date is March 1st. MyDQ will send out an email or has sent out an email to each RCO or responsible corporate officer on around January 1st of the year, alerting him or her that a report is due. I think it's important to realize that the email is coming from a do not respond email address, so it may end up in your spam folder. So if this is the case, well, this is the case for any email coming from MyDQ. So be aware of that and of the timings that I'm going over today. And if you don't get an email, check your spam folder. You must be an RCO or a DRO, a delegated responsible officer, which is what DRO stands for, to submit registration report, because these reports serve as notifications to the EPA. So an electronic signature is needed, and only RCOs and DROs have those agreements on file with ADEQ. So if you believe you've submitted a registration report, but MyDEQ is not recognizing it, for example, not letting you complete a generation report, then check with your RCO or DRO to see if submitting the report is still on his or her to-do list. Okay, you must submit the report. It looks like my pop-ups are in the wrong order. So you must submit the registration report before you submit the generation report, because MyDEQ needs to know the status of the site before it can calculate the generation fees. So that's the second time I've said that. MyDEQ also tracks past registration reports. So if you've neglected to submit a report in the past, so especially for people that have never been into MyDEQ, this will be the case. MyDEQ will prompt you to submit these missing reports first. Okay, so here's the fee structure. For VSQGs, there's no fee. However, the report is needed to keep the EPA ID number active. Otherwise, EPA has advised us that after 3 years of no activity, the state should deactivate the EPA ID number to keep the universe of handlers across the country accurate. At one point, it was 50,000 handlers inaccurately. It was way over. For SQGs, the fee is $100, and for LQGs, the fee is $300. For TSDFs, they owe $1,500 plus $10 for any hazardous waste they accepted on their site. And for transporters, both in-state and out-of-state, the fee is $200. Now the fees are cumulative. So if you're a large quantity generator that's also a transporter and a TSDF that accepted 1,000 tons of waste, then you owe $300 for LQG, $200 for transporter, plus $1,500 for the TSDF, plus 10 times 1,000 tons, and that all totals $12,000. So that would be your ending registration fee. Okay, Tayo, if you want to, we can show the video on that goes through how to report registration.
Yep, I'll get the video started right away.
Oh wait, no, this is my video. No, I should stay in charge. Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay, so the first thing you need to do is log into MyDEQ, and then navigate. You should be on My Stuff, which is up there in the upper left, and then go to select an action on the site you want to report for.
You'll have to share your screen again here.
What's that?
You'll have to share your screen again here.
Oh. Oh, because I blew it. You got it?
Yep, good to go.
Okay. Let's go back to the beginning. Okay, so log into MyDEQ. You're going to be on My Stuff. So go down to, in this case, there's only one there. Select the action and choose registration reporting. This page tells you what you need to complete the report and also how many minutes, 20 minutes to do it, or else you'll get logged off. So you see the first year is 2017, so this place did not do that. They don't like their VSQG, they're changing it to small, you can do that. If you don't treat or store or transport, just ignore those buttons. Otherwise your fee will go way up. They agreed with the status for 2018. Now, in this case, 2019 was the current year, and they didn't like what they were prompted to do. And if you don't agree with your current status, then it'll take you to the modified path, and you'll go through the whole notification process. So I'm going to change that back to yes, save and continue. You get a page that kind of summarizes your fee, 100 for small, 300 for large. You save that and you go to the edit page. This is important because a lot of times we get phone calls, gee, I did my report wrong. And once you have certified it, it takes a long time to correct those changes. So make sure you check them on that edit page. You then go to the certify page where you check the box and you answer the personal question. So in order to do this, you have to be either an RCO or a DRO. When you hit continue, it takes you to the page where you decide whether you want to pay now or pay later. If you pay later, you'll get an invoice at the beginning of the next month. We're going to pay now. Again, it gives you a summary of the fees. And it also gives you this pop-up warning that when you're done paying, you have to hit the continue button to get back to my DEQ to print out your certification form. So this is the payment page. It's the state of Arizona. Just fill this out like you would any online purchase. And there's the continue button down on the bottom. Okay. How do I get by? There we go. I think I need to advance through some pages here. Hold on. Sorry about this. Oh, wait, no. All right. How do I back up?
This video shows hazardous waste gen.
Should be able to use arrow keys.
Okay, hold on. I was lost there for a minute. Okay, back to generation reporting. Sorry about
And
that.
just swap your screen
gotta
over
mix it.
again.
Oh, sure. Do I need to swap them? Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
No.
No.
Still seeing that presenter view.
I swapped. Hold on. Go to display centers. You don't like that?
Actually, it might have froze. So let me take off presenter and just throw it back to you and see if it starts back up again.
Okay.
There we go.
It's good?
Yep.
Okay, generation reports must be submitted by all generators, but the timing depends on the generator's status. So annual is reports are submitted by very small quantity generators and small quantity generators. And their due date is February 15th. And they can be submitted by anyone registered in MyDEQ. And that is because this is just a transaction between the state and the customer. So EPA is not involved. So a signature agreement is not needed. So again, anybody registered in MyDEQ can submit a generation report. They can't be submitted until the annual registration is completed. So again, I'm mentioning that for the third time. And that is because the MyDEQ needs to know your status in order to calculate the fees. Just like the registration reports, if there's missing reports, they will have to be submitted through MyDEQ first. One of the caveats of that is though, MyDEQ didn't go live until October of 2018. So if there's a report due before that date, need to contact us and we'll forward you the paper copy like what was done in the past. Okay. Generation report is quarterly for large quantity generators and TSDFs. Those due dates are May 15th for the first quarter, August 15th for the second, November 15th for the third quarter, and February 15th for the fourth quarter. So it's basically 45 days after the quarter is ended. The same rules apply for as in annual generation reports. So that means you can't submit it until after you've done your registration, and anyone can submit it that's registered in MyDEQ. You don't have to be an RCO or a BRO. So here's the fee structure. For smalls, larges, and TSDFs, it depends. If material was shipped off site, then the fee is $67.50 a ton. And this is by far the most common. I don't think anybody does the second option, which is disposed of on site. And disposed of on site also includes disposed on a site that is also under control of the same person. And for EPA, the same person would be considered an organization too. So dispose of on site is $27. And VSQGs, the fee is $0. So no generation fee for those. Okay, Tayo, here's the video that you need to run on generation reporting.
Before we start that, we actually had a couple questions come in on the last two slides. Sure. So
this is a good time.
So one of the questions was, why are generation reports due before registration if registration is the first step?
It's a good question. I kind of pointed that out because, yeah, you have to register first. So basically, yeah, even though you can register by March 1st, generation has to be done first. It's one of those things that they didn't catch when they wrote the new rules. And we didn't find out about it until later. So I will tell you that there's no late fee unless you don't pay within 30 days of the invoice. That's when the late fees are incurred. So I hope that helps. I know it's kind of waving my hands in the air and saying I made a mistake. Nobody caught an unintended consequence, but yeah, it's the way that was. Okay, what's the other one?
Thank you. And then the other one is, are the dates imposed by CFR or ARS?
ARS. Actually, yeah, they're in the rules, or they're not in statutes, they're in rule. The only fee in statute is the $20 fee for resubmitting a manifest that's an error. And since we're doing that in e-manifests, they haven't really created a way of checking manifests for errors in that. So that's something that hasn't been charged for a while. So yeah, they're in rule, Arizona rules. They're not in statute or in the CFR.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and get the video started. If any more questions come up, feel free to send those our way.
Okay.
This video shows hazardous waste generators under RCRA, how to submit generation reports online. Before you begin, make sure you have the following items available: your generation reporting period dates, hazardous waste generated for each open reporting period, and a valid payment method. Start by logging into MyDEQ, and on your dashboard, find the facility for which you'd like to report. Click the drop-down menu under Actions and select Generation Reporting. It will then tell you what is required to successfully complete the application. To continue, click Start Application. MyDEQ will list past reporting periods and indicate that reporting was done through paper mail. I'll scroll down to view my most recent reporting period. Check the box or boxes that apply, entering the quantity of hazardous waste disposed on-site first, and then for hazardous waste shipped off-site, in either pounds or tons. Click Save to save the entry, and then click Save Page and continue. You'll see a breakdown of fees. Click to continue, and you'll review your submission. The next page requires you to certify your responses to confirm that you're the person submitting the report. Click to continue. You'll then be prompted to either pay your fees now or continue and receive an invoice later. If you choose to pay now, you can pay with a credit card or electronic check. A note here, in order for your submission to be finalized, you must click Continue on the final payment confirmation page. Then you will be redirected to your MyDEQ confirmation page. And here you can download and print your confirmation and generation report. Thank you for using MyDEQ for your permitting and compliance needs.
Okay, can you see my screen again?
Yep, good to go.
Okay, cool. So one of the things I wanted to point out is that that video actually shows you that the beginning of generation and registration reporting is similar, except you just click on either generation or registration on the drop-down list. And the payment is the same too. That video also goes over what happens after you pay. You click on continue, and that brings you back to the page where you can print out. And that page is important because if we go out to inspect you, we need to see those things on file. And right now we're doing virtual inspections, so we will ask for those to be emailed to us to make sure that you've made your payments. Okay. So one of the other things that happens when we go out on inspections is we might notice that you can take advantage, or the site can take advantage of episodic generation. So it's one of those topics about we receive some of the one of the more plentiful inquiries. It became available, believe it or not, back on October 1st, 2018, even before the rule was accepted, and kind of in the Arizona way of doing things. If the EPA's rules are less restrictive than ours, then we go by the EPA rules. So once EPA approved that and MyDEQ was programmed to accept it, that's when you were able to do it. But again, it was formally accepted last February, or February 2019. So the idea of the new rule is that it allows a hazardous waste generator to increase its status to ship hazardous waste offsite for a short period of time while retaining its lower status for the entire year. So this means that a VSQG can, for a short period of time, ship an SQG, and that would be over 220 pounds, but less than 2,200 pounds. Or an SQG can increase its shipments from 220 pounds to over 2,200 pounds and become an LQG for a short period of time. And a VSQG can also go from VSQG to LQG for a short period of time. So the period, that short period of time, is 60 days. And that means you have 60 days to ship the hazardous waste off-site after the starting time, and the starting time depends on whether it is, what type of event it is. So there's two types of events, planned and unplanned. You get one event of each type per calendar year. And the first event is generally automatic because that's the planned event. The second event, you have to petition ADEQ because that's usually the unplanned event, and we need to make sure in an unplanned event that it meets the requirements of an unplanned event. So what are the advantages? Well, first, for regulation purposes, your lower status applies even though you've raised your status for the 60 days. That means if you're increasing your status from VSQG to LQG, the regulations for VSQG still apply. And that's a great advantage for any site increasing its status during odd numbered calendar years, because normally the site would have to submit a biennial report to the EPA for during the following even numbered year. But if you are episodic, you don't need to do that. The second advantage is that the site returns to its original status after the 60-day period is over. So that means that you don't need to go back into MyDEQ and change the site status back to its original through the modification process. So it saves paperwork. Another advantage is that when the site registers in January of the following year, it should claim the lower status for the entire previous year. This means the registration fee for the lower status will apply. So it saves you money. For very small quantity generators, this means there'll be no registration fee. And And this could save you up to $300 if you were large for that episodic event. But there's a caveat. MyDEQ will know if the site claimed an episodic event. So the site will be required to pay the $67.50 for the hazardous waste generated during the calendar year. This means that the waste shipped off site during the episodic event is going to be combined with the rest of the hazardous waste shipped off site during the calendar year, and you pay the $67.50 a ton. But again, there's no registration fee. Okay, let's go over the different types of events. The planned event. If you wish to request a planned episodic event, you have to request it through MyDEQ at least 30 days prior to shipping any waste off-site. The 30-day delay starts once the request is submitted to MyDEQ, not the date on which the request is approved. Sometimes it takes us a while to approve them. So if you submit the request for the episodic event on August 1st, you can begin shipments on August 31st, even though the request may not be approved until August 14th. So planned events can cover just about any situation, but a couple of good examples would be scheduled tank cleanouts, which are maintenance things that happen on a regular basis, or disposing of expired product, which the site can't use any longer. Okay, unplanned events. You must request an episodic event that's unplanned through MyDEQ within 10 days of an incident causing the event. If you miss the 10-day window, your options are pretty limited. One is to hold the waste for another 30 days and request a planned event. Or if you've already had a planned event earlier in the year, you need to use the modified path in MyDEQ to change the site to the larger status for the entire year. Examples of unplanned events are what I call acts of God, and these include fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. None of those really happen too often in Arizona, except for the fires. But they also include large spills and requests from ADEQ to remove hazardous waste from a site, perhaps due to a complaint or an inspection. As I said before, unplanned events need to be reviewed by MyDEQ management to make sure they fit the requirements of an unplanned event. So they're a little bit harder to get. So what does the episodic part of MyDEQ path look like and function like? Well, normally you would click no on this part of the modification path, but in this case, we're going to click yes. And this takes you to a part you've never seen. So you click planned or unplanned. In this case, it's going to be planned. And then you click the event type and you see a bunch listed there. We're going to go with excess chemical inventory, but the other tab allows you to customize to what you need. The start date needs to be 30 days, and you can see that it knows what day today is, the 25th. And then the end date has to be within 60 days of the start date. So I was thinking of going to April 30th, and I'm like, wait a minute, I want to do 2 months. So I'll go to May 31st. Then you put in the contact information, and if you're lucky like me, it's auto-populated. When I hit save, notice there's a mistake. There's 31 days in there, so I actually have to change it from 61 down to something lower than that. Hit save and continue. Then you put in a short description of what the waste. In this case, I'm thinking I'm a drugstore, so I'm going to get rid of like nicotine products that are out of date. Then you put in the amount. And then for the waste codes, it's like the regular path where you can click on the commonly used ones by hitting shift over, or you enter it directly into the field. And then you can hit save and continue, and it'll bring you back to the regular path for modifications. Yep. Another option which generator has been given is the consolidation rule, which was adopted along with the other new hazardous waste rules back in 2019. So this allows a generator with multiple very small quantity generator sites to consolidate them with one large quantity generator site. The only requirement outside the multiple sites having to be VSQG is that all the sites are under the control of the same person. And then again, EPA defines a person as also an organization. So there's several advantages for the generator, and these include increased efficiency in managing and shipping the waste generated by the very small quantity generator. This may include, and I like to think of backhauling the VSQG waste when delivering product from the distribution center back to the backhauling the waste back to the distribution center, as that is the one acting as the large quantity generator. It can also ensure the proper management of very small quantity generator waste at the LQG site, as the personnel at the LQG will more likely have the proper hazardous and perhaps DOT training. Another advantage is that you don't need hazardous waste manifest when transporting the waste between the VSQG and the LQG. However, other shipping documents would be required per DOT rules. And finally, the transporter between the VSQG site and the LQG would not need to have an EPA ID number. So you could ship the waste yourself and not have to contract a transporter. So here are the requirements that you need to follow. For VSQGs, in addition to the hazardous waste rules for VSQGs, the very small quantity generator would need to comply with DOT requirements during transportation of the hazardous waste to the LQG site. And that's where the shipping documents come in. For the LQG, you need to notify the ADEQ 30 days prior to receiving the first shipment from the VSQG. This means that the request to consolidate would have to be submitted through MyDEQ 30 days before receiving the first VSQG waste shipment. The LQG should also retain shipping records from the VSQG site for 3 years, and this is the same amount of time that the site would need to retain the hazardous waste manifest. The VSQG waste would have to comply with LQG requirements while at the large quantity generator site. So just because the waste originated at the VSQG site doesn't mean it's exempt from complying with LQG rules once it's received by the large quantity generator. And then the large quantity generator must include the VSQG waste on its biennial report to the EPA every other year. So that means VSQG waste is counted as part of the LQG waste for EPA purposes. Okay, so how do you report if MyDEQ isn't set up for this yet? Okay, so we've developed a workaround. After logging in to MyDEQ and finding the large quantity generator for which you want to be consolidating the VSQGs into on My Stuff, choose the modified path when clicking on the drop-down list to the right of the site's information, like we've been doing in the other examples today. After completing the usual information along the modified path, in the comments field at the end of the application, enter the VSQG's name, its site physical address, the site's contact name, and the site's contact number. And you need to do this for each VSQG you want to consolidate with the LQG. So here's the comments field at the end of the modified path. And there's an example of what you would need to put in. So name of the site, the physical address, the contact person, and the contact person's phone number. So here's the fail-safe. We know that that comments field is not equipped with a very large character number. So at some point, if you're consolidating quite a few VSQGs into an LQG, you might run out of room. So what you need to do, and this also helps if you're only adding 2, follow up the submission with an email to ADEQ, and the contacts are at the end of the presentation. And this will, when you do send us the email, include the LQG site name and EPID number. And because these requests are really rare, or we've only had 2 so far, the email will prompt us, meaning Matt and I, to look at your request, because normally we don't look for this kind of request on one of those things. The comments field is very rarely filled out. And in the email, also include the VSQG information that was in the comments field, and then any additional VSQ information that wouldn't fit into the field because you had so many. Then what will happen is that ADEQ will edit the submission in RCRA info the next day. The request will be, after it's approved, will go up to RCRA info. It will not have all the VSQGs in there. So we'll go up and we'll add it ourselves. We have the ability to do that. Then if you give us a week to do that, you can go back into RCRA info or into Echo and make sure the edits have been done. And if the edits haven't been done, you can always email us and say, hey, you haven't edited my consolidation request yet. So this concludes the main portion of the presentation, but I wanted to let you know about all the online resources ADEQ has to help you through the various processes and submissions you need to make in MyDEQ. And as we go through the list, the URLs for the resources are included. So the first is how to request a MyDEQ account. This is for any of you who have not yet signed up for MyDEQ at all and performed any of its functions. There's also a fact sheet explaining the user roles and responsibilities. Again, this is mainly for first-time users and should be looked at before anyone in your organization requests an account. There's also a fact sheet explaining how to add a user to an account. So if a responsible corporate officer or delegated responsible officer wants to hand down some of the job tasks to other people in the organization, this sheet explains how they can do that. Another question we get a lot is often the RCO changes. The RCO leaves or retires, and now you're kind of left in a lurch because nobody else has the ability to submit forms. So there is actually a request to change form with instructions on our website that you can use to change the RCO. So all of those little resources can be found at that website at azdeq.gov/node/1952, or you can just go to the main website, click on MyDEQ, and then click on Service Center, and then all that information pops up for you, all those links. So within the previous year, ADEQ's also posted guides, and Tyler was one of the person that created them to help you through most of the processes addressed in this presentation. So there's a guide to help you submit the registration report. There's also a guide to help you submit the generation report. And then, of course, the video that we saw in this presentation is also up there on the site. And there's also a guide up there to help you through submitting an episodic event. All right, so here are the contacts if you run into any problems. And there's Matt Helton. Again, he started as the business analyst for hazardous waste in June of last year. So he's the main contact. But I'm also still available, and there are some things that that Matt still has not worked on. So like the buy any report that I'm probably the main contact for. But you can always get a hold of me if you can't get a hold of Matt. And finally, and this is a really important one, if you are locked out of your account, if you need a new user ID, or you forgot your password or are having problems registering as a user, adding a user or changing an RCO, you really need to go to MyDEQ support because we don't have the ability to help you with any of those issues, but MyDEQ support does. So again, all of our emails and phone numbers are there, and when you get the PDFs of this presentation, you'll have them available. So thank you very much for your attention, and now I can answer any questions that have built up over the last 40 minutes.
Yeah, so we had quite a few come in. So started off, how long does ADEQ have to review or approve an EPA ID update?
That's a good question. We have a goal, which I believe is 7 days. Matt might be able to address that a little bit better than I can. But I will tell you that this is the busy time of the year because everybody's reporting for both generation and registration. And that brings to mind that maybe they want to change their status or their contact has changed and other things. So they're modifying also. So especially if one of the big chain stores decides that they want to change things, it's very big. So right now, I think it's in the 80s or 90s that are waiting to be done. And it doesn't take long for us to review them, but what may take long is we might want to have something amended, like your owner doesn't quite match what's in the assessor's office. And so we send an email back saying, hey, can you change that? And then that kind of just stays in limbo for a while. So generally, we get to them within 2 or 3 days, but I pretty much think that 80% of the ones that come in will send an email back saying, hey, can you change the start date of something, or you can change this. So there's a little bit of back and forth. So right now it might be 2 weeks, but in August, it could be 2 hours. So it depends on the time of year. And hopefully we'll address that. That's why we hired a business analyst to take over for me rather than just somebody that enters data. So he can figure out a way to get this done faster.
Right. Next question is, will a customer be charged late fees if they don't pay by March 1st, as stated on my DEQ's reminder email?
Yeah, the late fees, the late fees aren't charged until 30 days after the invoice is created. So again, if you respond today and you want to pay later, the invoice will be created on March 1st, and so you'll have you'll have a month. You won't have to pay until April 1st. If you don't pay by April 1st, then interest begins to accrue. I don't think there's a late fee yet, so I hope that helps. So, for instance, if you did not report something from 2019 and you report it today, there'll be no late fee. Only if you don't pay for it for another 30 days. Interesting.
So can you have more than one disposal during the 60-day period of an episodic event without having to file for another episodic event?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, as long as it takes place during that 60 days, you can ship out as many manifests as you want. That's the whole idea, to get all that stuff off the property is during that 60-day window.
Thank you. When a VSQG or SQG has an episodic event that temporarily shifts them to an LQG for that 60-day period, do they follow the LQG requirements, or do they continue to follow the VSQG or SQG requirements?
Yeah, they follow the VSQG or SQG requirements. So you don't have as much, you don't have to create the quick reference guides and all that kind of stuff that an LQG would have to do. That's one of the big advantages. There's a lot less paperwork to be episodic than to be an LQG for, and the old saying was, if you're LQG for a day, you're LQG for a year, but not anymore.
Hey, and I think we covered this earlier, but how long does it take for ADEQ to process a modification to generator status? And you were talking about how that was dependent on kind of the time of year.
Yeah, our goal again is 7 days, but during this, it's impossible. I mean, imagine Matt is fielding, 50 calls a day, and it just builds up, the backlog builds up. And again, most of these requests in the backlog are waiting for a response from the customer. And so, the touch time is really short. The touch time is like 20 minutes, but the elapsed time can be up to 2 weeks during this time, and maybe longer. And again, if somebody doesn't respond, we actually had to put in an option that my DEQ, after 90 days of no response from the customer, will automatically deny the request. Because at one point we had 40 or 50 of them in the backlog that were there for over a year because we weren't getting a response from the customer after many tries of phone calling and emailing them.
And then we just have one more question here with, are the LQG quarterly reports all submitted directly to my DEQ?
Yes. The only ones that wouldn't would be, and we're kind of running out of time because we only go back 3 years. So you'd need 20, 19, and 18. So the only ones that would be on paper and not going directly to my DQ would be the first and second quarters of 2018. That's all that have to be done on paper right now.
Hey, I'm not seeing any more questions come through here. Oh, one more just came through. So if a customer originally submits an episodic event for X amount of waste and another disposal happens within the 60-day time frame, does the episodic event report have to be modified?
No, because you're really just giving an estimate. So I don't think so. That all comes out at the end of the year when you do your generation reporting, and they'll see the additional amount. But yeah, I don't think you have to modify that report. I don't think there's a way to do that actually. Especially since I don't know if you know this, but you can only modify your EPID number once every 30 days. So it would be hard, especially if you came up, shipped out one day and then a week later found out that you had more waste. You wouldn't be able to modify for another 3 weeks anyway. So yeah, I don't think, no, don't just estimate it. And if it's wrong, it'll come out at the end of the year.
Awesome. So just one more question on if the webinar is being recorded. We may be able to put up the recordings, but if not, you will definitely get a PDF of these slides. And of course, you can send any questions to David or Matt, as he has the contact information on those slides as well. So when this webinar wraps up, shortly after that, probably within the hour, you'll get a PDF of this presentation that we just went through. And you'll also have a chance to go through, give any feedback on a survey. So when this webinar closes out, that will open up. And you can also give recommendations if you have any ideas for future topics or other webinars. So with that, thank you very much, David. And thank you everyone else for attending, and hope everyone has a great day.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone.